I,
Totally.
I blink and the whole day's gone by.
For sure, which is great. You know, it's a
Yeah.
great thing that Scott Bass does. Um, well, I'm glad that we get the chance to talk, but honestly, it was really your Instagram video that you posted that made me want to hear more about what you've experienced recently. Uh,
Yeah.
it sounded really harrowing, but you just did such a great job articulating a certain gratitude and new lease on life that it made me reconsider the way I live my life, even,
Yeah.
you know, to like take things much more, I don't know, sincerely and seriously and all that. So I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are taking for granted the little things in life that make life worth living. And something as simple as a glass of water and how good it tastes. I didn't eat or drink anything for 4 months.
Really,
So that first drink of water was like heaven.
that's
But,
incredible.
but starting with your family, definitely your friends, um, surfing, nature, sunlight, so yeah, you start to realize that, you're fine. You usually have everything you actually need. And if you just learn to appreciate it, and I think a lot of people are forgetting, you know, so
We do forget. And then even when we get the reminder, it's only a matter of time until you fall back into that other perspective, the forgetfulness. What do you reckon is a good way to maintain that perspective?
just try to slow things down. Um, the world's gotten so fast, and I'm old enough to remember where it wasn't like that, and where you had time to take a nap, let's say.
Yep.
And, something like surfing and then taking a nap on the beach was awesome when I was younger. And I think that's the best, some of the best advice is just really, try to slow things down as much as possible and be present during those moments. Because even though, we can handle a lot and do a lot of stuff, but if you're focused on the future and not in the present, then you're really not getting a lot out of it.
Right.
So, surfing is one of these things where it forces you to be present. And it's amazing that we can surf as well as we do. Um, and I imagine a lot of sports are like that, but surfing is more dynamic than most sports, because it's the wave is moving and,
Right.
you have to be at one with it or, you get wiped out. And so, the presence of mind to appreciate things. And, that goes along with, telling your spouse or your friends or your kids or, whoever that you love them and you appreciate them.
Yeah.
Make that connection with people. Uh, my situation in the hospital, like, it doesn't get as bad as where I was. And I was so
Right.
dependent upon my family, the doctors, the nurses, um, my extended family that couldn't be there, and my friends and fans that were all praying for me. There's some type of magic with that lifetime connection with people that you get. For me, I'm lucky I have this job that, my art goes out in the world and it makes people happy. And, it kind of ties their mind to this happy moment. And it all came back to me. And I got to think that thousands of people wishing me well across the world helped me survive,
Fascinating.
um, as well as the fitness of surfing.
Right.
So, you look at people that aren't real mindful of what they eat and how their body is, they would not have survived. Um,
Well, I I'm going to ask you a little bit more about willpower and other people's the effect that that prayer and stuff has. But before I do, can you kind of start from the beginning about how you contracted COVID? What was your how were you viewing COVID prior to contracting it? And then how severe was your case?
Um, I mean, COVID for me, I definitely was worried about it. I understood how gnarly it was. I did not feel that I was a good candidate because I was very strong and, my body, I take care of myself. I hardly ever get sick. Um, but, we were driving across country when I caught it. So we were trying to avoid people on airplanes. I didn't think being on an airplane was a good idea. So we chose to drive. And, I was seeing family, you know, and that was about it. But I didn't catch it uh, being around family. I caught it driving across country at like a random gas station or something.
Wow.
I mean, I must have walked through a cloud of somebody coughing because you know, I'm actually an introvert. Um, I don't like being around a lot of people. And, I do it for, when I got to go to events and things, but normally I like kind of doing everything by myself. And so it was just my wife and I, and, we have no idea. It was somewhere between Tennessee and Colorado. And I was driving 8 to 10 hours a day. And prior to that, I'll back up a little bit. The COVID in itself destroyed our business.
Oh, really?
And so we lost all our contracts when COVID hit. And, we almost had to shut our gallery down. And I had to double time it to save my business and my, livelihood, um, which was terrifying. I think a lot of people forget that, that for, independent people, I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And so I really had to work, tremendously to save everything, which I did. But I was working, so much that I ground myself down to a nub. So even
Gotcha.
though I was in good health, it was the worst health that I'd been in my life. Um, and then driving 10 hours a day for, weeks was not very good for me either. So I was not sleeping real well. And so when I did contract it, I was at my weakest, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
And on top of that, I was in the middle of the country. And so, not realizing that I had COVID, I continued to drive for 3 days. And so, by the time I got home, I was really sick. And I thought that I was just run down, that all I needed was a good night's sleep, and I'd wake up and I'd feel better. And of course, that didn't happen. I went to sleep and I didn't get up. And a lot of people don't realize my wife was sick too. And, we don't have any family here in California. And so we were both too sick to help ourselves. So a couple days into it, I think it was actually 3 days into it, um, my wife was on the phone with my sister and she said, "You guys got to go to the hospital or something." And so my wife got enough energy together to us to go to urgent care to get tested first to see if we had COVID. And of course, it came back positive. And my blood, or not my blood, but my oxygen test said I was only at 70%. And the lady said, "I don't know how you walked in here. You got to go right to the emergency room." So that's basically how it went down.
Gotcha.
And, my ignorance of never really being sick ever, I've never been hospitalized. Um, Maybe thinking I was a lot stronger than I was, um, overconfident, those types of things definitely played into it. But there again, I'd never been sick before, so I didn't know, that it could be that bad. When I got to the emergency room, they took me right in and did some tests and then took me right to ICU. So I was really bad off.
And was Maria recovering at that point?
Yeah, Maria didn't get it as bad, but you know, there again, you know, I'd been working myself to a bone and then also driving, you know,
Yeah.
for a long period of time.
Right.
And so I was just toast.
Right.
And but yeah, so she recovered pretty quick. And unfortunately for me, I continued to get worse. I was fighting it in the hospital, and I was determined to beat it. And what I was doing was the doctor said I needed to, you know, breathe. I was on oxygen. And so I was doing these breathing exercises really heavy, like trying to inflate my lungs. And your lungs get really hard when you have COVID pneumonia. And, you know, I was just a bulldog breathing, and I actually breathed really too much, inflated my lungs too much, and I popped 2 holes in my right lung.
Oh my gosh.
So I had a total lung collapse on the right side, and that's when I got into trouble.
Did they catch that immediately?
Yeah, they caught it, and then basically from that point, the doctor came in and said, "Okay, there's three ways this is going to go down." He said, you could choose to continue to fight." He said, "But you're going to die. 100% you're going to die." He said, "Or number 2 scenario is maybe you don't die right away, but you're fighting so hard, you're going to have a heart attack and you're going to die." He said, "Or we put you, we intubate you, give your lungs a rest." He said, "But I'm sorry to say that you're probably going to die there too. You're too far gone. You probably have less than a 20% chance of surviving it."
Wow.
And me, I was like, "No way, man." I was like, "I got this." You know, my mindset was different. Um, I mean, it's scary to have a doctor tell you these things, but you know, my mindset was totally different. Um, and my wife and my sister were in a window looking at me, you know, when this all went down with the doctor. And so I said, "Okay, I'll go under." But number one, I was unafraid. I think, you know, if you let fear creep in, um, you're done. And I was telling my wife, you know, "No problem, I got this," you know. And you know, that's not something you choose to do, to be afraid or not afraid.
Yeah.
It's essentially a way that you live. So you know, telling people out there, you know, how do you live your life? What's your normal temperament? Are you the type of person that's afraid of everything, or you're a person that, you know, feels that you can deal with almost anything? So for those of you that, you know, feel you're afraid of everything, you might want to work on that, because when stuff happens and things get real, you don't want to be the person that curls up in a ball and cries. You got to rise to the occasion. Um, and that can't really be taught. It's something you got to work on your own. So,
I think having purpose in life, you know, like when you're looking at your wife and your sister, that certainly gives you a reason to
yeah.
fight.
Yeah. I mean, I always think of like single people that really don't have if they don't have kids or a wife, I could see how you could definitely let go.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, you know, my wife and son need me, and not to
Right.
mention that, you know, there's a lot of stuff I want to do still. Um, so definitely having that somebody that needs you and depends on you is a big motivator. Um, so yeah, it's real important.
So you get intubated.
Yeah. And being intubated, you know, they put nitrous oxide on me right away and knocked me out. Um, so it's quick. I mean, we made the decision. The next thing you know, I'm waving goodbye, and that was it. Um, I don't, you know, once you're intubated, uh, you're put on a ventilator, and that gives your body a chance to relax. But the problem is they put you on these heavy drugs, fentanyl, Versed, really bad stuff. And, you know, I had no idea what was in store for me while I was under. But they're pickling me with all these drugs, and that's to induce a coma. Um, while I was in the coma, every day that goes by is causing atrophy in your body.
Okay.
Everything's wilting away. Your body starts to feed on itself. And, you know, during that time period, um, you know, I was intubated for 28 days, which
Wow.
is unheard of. And they said, you know, about halfway through, they told my wife I wasn't coming back.
Wow.
Um, and so she was brokenhearted, but she took it the other way. And that's when she really started to fight. And she was putting the messages out there that, you know, people need to pray. And she had the mindset that I was coming back, and that, you know, she just wanted more people to know that I was coming back, and that I was still alive. I wasn't dead, even though the doctors were kind of giving up. Meanwhile, while I'm in the coma, my soul was free. I was like floating in the other side. I had a near death experience that we might save for another time. It was extraordinary.
Have you talked about that yet, or do you just?
Uh, to individuals, not really to publicly, but I had a magical experience that, you know, I can accept it could have been a dream or something, but I don't remember any of the dreams. I remember this. And
Hmm.
it was, you know, amazing. And it was the light. It was, um, all I can say is there's nothing to fear. There never was. And, you know, enjoy being here as much as you can. You're, you know, there's plenty more to come. So
Hmm.
don't be in a hurry to get there. It'll be there when
Hmm.
you're ready.
Wow.
Um, so I was not struggling at all. But when they did tell me I had to go back, I do remember the pressure of being forced back into my body. And this was 28 days in. All the while, at this point, since they thought I was going to die, my they let my wife and sister in, and they had been like rubbing my feet and um, reading to me, talking to me the whole time when I was out. I think after 2 weeks in, they let my wife in, and my wife was, and they actually had an iPad prior to that, where my wife would talk to me and stuff via the iPad. I really felt bad for her because she was, you know, 100% in, and you know, I was unresponsive. But on that 28th day, when I got back in, I woke up through the drugs, and the doctors didn't know what to think. They'd said they'd never seen somebody fight through the drugs to awaken. And, you know, I wasn't fully awake, but I was fighting it, and I was moving, like trying to move at least. And my wife said I squeezed her hand, and I was back. Uh, I don't remember waking up. I don't remember the moment, but I do remember the moment I came through and I realized I was awake again. But it was a couple days before I like got my sorted myself out, and I didn't really understand that I was paralyzed. I'd lost 100 pounds in the ordeal.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, I was about 205, 210, and I went down to 105.
Wow. That's so tiny.
So I was a skeleton. I
Yeah.
looked like I was right out of the Nazi death camps,
Right.
though I couldn't see myself. Um, I didn't understand I was paralyzed. I thought I was actually um, part of the floor. Believe it or not, I was trying to move and I was like, oh, like, how come I can't move? And there was the drugs, that maybe not be
Yeah.
able to think straight. And then I couldn't understand what the nurses were saying. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't talk. And, nothing made sense. And that went on for a long time, not understanding what was wrong and not being able to communicate. Um, it was torture watching them, putting needles and doing things to me. I had all kinds of tubes in me. Um, felt like one of the Borg or something out of Star Trek, just like things coming out of me everywhere.
Yeah.
And then, my right hand was like the only thing that kind of worked. Um, and they kept trying to put a pen in my hand and I couldn't hold it. And then slowly I began to be able to hold it. And then I'd try to write, but I could just go across the paper, couldn't do anything. And then eventually I could write something. I don't know how long that took, like a month or something.
Oh my gosh.
But first thing I wrote was, "Why am I paralyzed?" I had no, like, I was hell bent on surviving, but nobody told me about the paralysis and the atrophy and all that. So it didn't compute. And, that was a harsh pill to swallow. Um, and I had some, hero nurses um, in there that were trying to get me to sit up and do things because it's real important to get your body moving. But with all the shortages and stuff, there just wasn't enough people. So the learned a lot about the medical system. It's really great people in there, but it's definitely not perfect. I believe everybody did the best they could for me, but a lot of things went wrong that were at my expense.
Wow.
Um, and I don't blame anybody. It's just there's just so much going on that things fall through the cracks. It's really hard to break them out of their system that they have,
Yep.
and they might not be making the best decisions for some COVID patients. Um,
Right.
which is unfortunate. We had to fight for everything from vitamin C drips to, getting nourishment. I wasn't being fed for a long time. So, you can't get better if you're not getting nutrients. Um, just, I always felt like I was dehydrated. Um, they weren't giving me enough water, and that water would go through a G tube into my stomach. Um, so things like that. But
Yeah. Having an advocate like your wife is hugely helpful with that, I'm sure.
yeah, an advocate is everything.
Yeah.
And even the doctor said that usually the people that survive, not just COVID, but anything that's, really serious, if you don't have somebody in there fighting for you, um, mistakes are made, things go wrong,
Yeah.
it's just, and your morale's down.
Right.
It's no fun to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Uh, it's awful. And the beeping, everything's beeping, you can't sleep, constantly getting blood drawn. I was getting needles, every couple hours. Um, just the drugs. I mean, I don't do any drugs. I don't smoke. You know, the amount of drugs that they were giving me it was just insane.
Mm.
And, I think my body's really sensitive to the drugs. And
Yeah.
that's all they want to do is give you more drugs. And I'm like, man, I don't want all these drugs. And you can't make good decisions when you're on drugs.
Yeah.
So that was upsetting me. But, basically, it took me a long time before I guess it was somewhere time in February where I was not in danger of dying.
Okay.
So I was still in ICU in mid-February. And, I didn't realize it, but I was still really close to like having something go wrong. And I've come to find out now that, other COVID patients have a lot of other things that go wrong due to their abuse of their bodies usually. But, they could be, other organ failures, or a big one's blood clots. So,
Okay.
some people have had their limbs cut off and things like that due to blood clots. A lot of strokes.
Okay.
And I saw it all. So I had people dying all around me, which was awful. From the moment I woke up, there was people dying all around me in the COVID unit. Some had family members around, some didn't. That was pretty scary as they dropped off, because you're just like, oh, wow, it's getting real. And all the alarms are going off, code blue. And, it's that happens enough that you feel like you're in a war zone and you can't get out. Just the alarms and the intensity of, everybody working and running around, and you're just laying there like just powerless,
Right.
is pretty damaging. And they call it ICU psychosis, that, you're just all of a sudden, you just can't take anymore, but you can't get out. So
Mm-hmm.
it's maddening. So, yeah.
Let me ask you, when you were in the coma, you said that your wife was talking to you through the iPad, and at a certain point she was able to rub your feet. Were you conscious of any of that, or did you process any of that in the coma?
I didn't know it at all.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Doug, I was gone. I don't think I was there. I think I was out in the ether.
Do you think it has an effect?
Yeah, I definitely do. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's the thoughts, I don't think it's so much physical. I think it's the thoughts. I mean, at times, your mental strength is really tested. You can't communicate, you can't move. And you're like, where they say there's no atheists in foxholes. It's kind of that
Right.
same thing. I mean, you're praying, please God, help me.
Yeah.
And you're thanking your friends and family, you're thanking the nurses and the doctors, and you're just like, trying to build the strength to go on, really what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I could say that I could feel the hopes and prayers of all the people. And, I needed it. I needed it every day because
Um,
it was so dark.
say more about that. Like, in what way do you feel it? And was it because your wife had communicated it to you at some point that there was a large community rallying for you? Or was it just something that you sense?
Um, it was just something that like a, kind of like charging your iPhone. It was just like an energy that you tap into, and it partially goes back to the near death experience of being in the light and realizing everybody's connected, and they tap into you and give you their energy. They were giving it to me, and I, just in those dark moments where it was really hard, I just repeated myself, I am the light. I can't be extinguished. I'm the light. And, you know, my wife did communicate to me that lots of people were praying. And my wife and the girl that works for me, Christine, my sister, they and my son, they decorated my room with pictures of my life, of my family.
Okay.
There's pictures of me surfing on big waves, pictures of me paddling down the Colorado, um, pictures of me hanging out with my son and my wife and my extended family. And I could see those pictures, which reminded me who I was, not where I was, like in this predicament. So all those things become very important. And no, but I could feel the hopes and prayers, and I tapped into them as often as I possibly could, because I mean, it was crazy, man.
It's what's crazy to me is that I've heard doctors talk about willpower being so important and being a deciding factor for like cancer patients, whether they survive or not. And so it's surprising that the doctor would have almost tried to erode your willpower at the beginning by saying, we have these three options. All three of those, you're going to die. Like, why would he even present it that way? I mean, other than it's just the stark reality, you know?
Yeah, I think uh, he was just preparing me for what I was up against. He's not sugarcoating it. He's just like, this is the way it is. Um, and most of the doctors, not just him, during this whole time period, were pretty frank with me about everything. Um, so the willpower side of it comes into play. You're exactly right. I mean, I basically been told I couldn't do anything my whole life. Why would this be any different?
Mm,
So I just looked at him like, well, maybe that's most people, but I'm getting through this.
yeah,
I never wavered in that.
good.
I'm still, not normal yet, and I know I'll make 100% recovery. Um, um, I still need oxygen at night. I can't do some things yet. I can't surf. I'm still super weak. I got to build back my body. Um, I got kidney stones from bone loss due to the paralysis. So I got some hurdles still, but I have no doubt I'm going to make 100% recovery. Not only that, I'm going to be better shape because I'm going to be able to maybe stay at that 175 ideal weight that I had
Mm.
when I was like 25. So I'm going to try to get there and stay there. Um,
Did you ever see that doctor again who gave that initial prognosis?
yeah,
And I mean, he had to be surprised and amazed at your recovery,
they were calling me the miracle man.
were they?
Yeah, they're doing a case study on me now. They found out that nobody my age went through as much as I did survived. So they're trying to figure out what it was um, that made me survive. And they like to think it's something they did,
Right.
but I think it was all the things that we did, Maria and myself, just that sheer will to live.
Hmm.
And that's why I tell people to work on that being present and that don't give in to fear and that type of thing. Don't live your life in fear. There's nothing to fear. You know, tackle everything with the idea that I'm going to figure this out. I had to accept the fact if God decided to take me, so be it. There's nothing I can do about that. But
Yeah.
I wanted to stay. I got stuff I want to do. You know, I
Let me
want.
ask you, without going into the near-death experience, uh, clearly that's changed your perspective on life and your outlook. Now having that altered perspective, what would you have done differently in the first half of your life?
Um, I don't know. I've led a pretty dangerous life, so I don't know if I'd do anything differently. I would possibly gone further out on a limb.
Really?
I would have I would have pushed the envelope that much more. I would have said yes to more things. I would have, started earlier.
Hmm.
Like, I kind of had that mindset, even before, but now that I look at it, I just be like, we're put here to have experiences, and we're technically creation machines. We're creating this world that we live in, and I think one of the things I would be is nicer to people. I mean, I developed being nice to people, but I would say in my younger years, I was so, uh, I how could I put it? I grew up in the South where you are taught yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and if you do a good job, you get paid. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. But once I got out in the world, I found out that not everybody's playing by those rules, and I got taken advantage of, and it made me angry that people would do that. And so you're kind of put in the position of being a sucker or an asshole. Well, I
Yeah.
wasn't a sucker, and I would fight back. And so, you know, I would like to think I'm a really nice guy. I've done a lot of good in this world, but I got a short fuse if it gets lit. And I don't like that about myself. So I probably want to change that because in the end, we're all connected and you need to help the people that are having the worst day of their life or having a weak moment.
Yeah.
That's why you need to be wise or wiser than other people so that you can help them.
Yeah.
Or you can understand where they're at and have compassion for them. So I think that's a better answer. Like just, love and compassion for your fellow man that maybe they're not where you're at. Maybe you can help them, or maybe you can just understand that they're not where you're at. Maybe they don't have to be fixed. You don't have to
Yeah.
fix everything. It's just being okay. It's like seeing somebody run a stop sign instead of calling them a jerk. Say, well, who knows? Maybe they're having some crazy day that they're in a hurry and they're not thinking right. And instead, maybe just say a little prayer for them, like, hey, man, I hope, this settles down for you.
Sound, I mean, you talked about there's nothing to fear. And all those things that you just mentioned, I think are the result of fear. Like if you fear, or if somebody is taking advantage of you, it's a fear of, what they're taking from you. Or if you didn't go out on a limb for far enough when you were young, It's because you're afraid of the failure or afraid of the consequence or whatever. So it all kind of comes back to the initial thing that you said,
Yeah.
which is there's nothing to fear. Being kind to people.
Yeah.
It's, there's nothing to fear there.
Yeah.
Can I ask, you're referencing God and a certain spirituality. Are you religious or were you religious before? And how did this near death experience alter your perspective on religion?
I'm not religious. I did grow up Catholic, so I was introduced to religion at a young age. Um, I am very curious about uh, like anthropology and ancient civilizations, um, ancient wisdom, those types of things. So in those things, there's a lot of messages, and uh, I think all of the religions are basically saying the same thing. Uh, they just package it a little different. Um, they seem to be coming from something very ancient that they're all spinning off of some knowledge from way 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 back. So in that idea, it's probably has something to do with what I saw, which is the light, and that everybody's part of that light. And when you think of when they talk about Jesus or something, I am the light of the world, I'm the Son of God. Think of the word son in itself, the light. So all these things are very very similar. And as surfers and stuff, we become amateur meteorologists, and uh, for me, wanting to know why the waves are good and studying the weather on a global, concept, there's only so far you can go, and then you start looking at the sun. And so I'm really interested in the sun as well. And what's really interesting about a lot of the, ancient myths and things are really about the cosmos. Um, the sun, the solar system, the galaxy. And so given that, that starts to come into play too. So the religion thing is a lot more dynamic than what people think the dogmas and stuff are. So I guess that's a long answer. I guess I am religious on some, not religious, but interested in where the stories come from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and with what I saw, it seems right on target.
Okay. So it affirmed a lot of your beliefs that you already held.
Yeah, just like, one of the things of studying the solar system, and I go to these conferences that are based off of uh, the sun and the solar system, the Earth, and there'll be people from a lot of the aerospace companies and NASA and you know meteorologists, climatologists, all these people. And one of the things is we're so part of the Earth or our human body that
Yeah.
I mean we're literally part of it. Um, and when I had this out of body experience, I really saw that this body's part of it, but you are not this body. And that was abundantly clear to me in this uh, experience that I had.
Yeah.
And when you talk about space travel and stuff, I'm not so sure we're going to be able to go to Mars because our bodies are built for the Earth. We're
Right.
part of that electromagnetic system that's here. So, I just think about that, and maybe we won't work once we get outside that electromagnetic field,
Right.
which is really interesting to me. Um, but
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to use this to segue into your art because it seems like a lot of these themes you've been interested in for decades. Um, I know your art is kind of defined. I think it's as quantum art.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that means and how this all ties together?
Well, everything comes from what I'm working on. And, a number of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I got hired to do a mural for a company that was structuring water. And so with any project that I get hired to do, whether it's a surf company or it's Google or 3M, IBM, I've worked for a lot of companies. And I have to research what we're doing and what the message is, what the it has to be right. So this company hires me, and I didn't know anything about structured water. I was like, well, what is
I
it?
don't know what that even is. Yeah.
Right. So I had to learn. So I dive in, I read all the material, I watch videos, and come to find out that water is not just water. It's not as simple as just water. And what it does is it seems to uh, rain down from the clouds. It'll land on the earth, and as it rolls down through the streams and rivers, it gets introduced to all the different earth minerals. And those earth minerals give off an electromagnetic frequency. And that frequency gets embedded in the structure, the lattice structure of the water. So it's almost like the water is recording the necessary minerals that the human body needs to build itself. And these shapes are beautiful. They come out as like the platonic solids. And so these crazy three-dimensional geometries are within the lattice structure of all the minerals, but the water seems, once it hits that electromagnetic field of the mineral, it'll mimic it within its lattice structure, almost like a hard drive that your body can then, you drink that water, it can read that and build. It says, all right, the body knows how to build itself. It just needs the tools. And that's what the water's kind of doing. And they were using this for big agriculture to help plants grow better, be resistant
Wow.
to pests without fertilizers or anything like that. They were just taking the water and, instead of putting nitrogen and stuff on them, the water was, had nitrogen embedded in its lattice structure, stuff like this. And it was crazy. So from there, I met a theoretical physicist, Nassim Harriman, and he was saying, you got to come to my talk. And I went to his talk, and his was all about, measuring the uh, mass of a proton and all this kind of stuff. So I got interested in physics. And from there, the only way I could understand it was to paint it and draw it. And that's where all these uh, geometric paintings are coming from. And it's basically what it is an articulation of how everything works. And, lots of different scientists and artists have used this in the past as an articulation of things. And I'll give you an example of why it works in art. In art, or your body, let's say your eyes, for instance, and all your senses are electromagnetic frequency detectors. And what that means is it's trained to look for perfection. Something smells good to you because your body wants it. Something tastes good because your body needs it. Something looks good because your body wants it. Now with your eyes, you have these proportions that look good to you automatically because it's the right proportions laid out in a certain way. We call it composition, but it's more important that, it's flow and design and all these things. And then you add color into there, you like certain things. So you might like a piece, you don't know why you like it, you just like it. But an artist that understands these principles understands why you like it. And it doesn't even have to be that well done.
Mm.
So a master painter could paint a painting without these principles and you don't like it. And then a kid can come up and do this crude thing with these principles and you like it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like music too. We can all
Yeah.
recognize a sour note. You don't like it. It doesn't fit. It sounds bad. So if you get the notes right, it's almost like you can put them in any order.
Right.
But if you get the note wrong, it sticks out like a sore thumb.
I
And
I had seen a study like 5 years ago. Um, I think it was a college student who was doing a thesis on it, but it was like Adele, the singer Adele, her music resonates on an emotional level with all of humanity, regardless of what language they speak. And they were able to isolate these kind of tonal frequencies that she's hitting with her voice that just hits a part of your emotionality or maybe your heart or whatever and makes you cry, essentially,
yeah,
and feel certain things.
yeah, and I could totally see that happening. Um, so that's kind of what that journey into, what they call sacred geometry and the
Yeah.
understanding of what's important to this. Um, I was very interested. And what I found out also is there's Maria. She comes
Hi,
from by.
Maria. Nice to see you.
Hello.
What I found out is I was already doing it. So, as an artist, I was innately doing some of these proportions already. And I got to think that's why people like my art, is
Yeah,
because,
gotcha.
um, you know, the subject matter could have been anything. It's just the fact that I did have these proportions and flow, and color schemes right. And now I'm really incorporating both. I like showing the mechanics of the geometry into a painting so that people can understand this information,
Yeah.
because they don't really teach it. They used to. It used to be at the basis of all the sciences. And
I mean, that's what's fascinating about it is that you think of engineering as being over here and painting as being over here, but it's fascinating to understand painting kind of from an engineering perspective.
well, it's mathematics too. So what's crazy is, I could imagine a school system where you start out the day with this study of geometry and sacred geometry, and then that same study gets applied to all your other curriculum.
It
So when,
should.
so when you go into math, they put that same concept into math, geometry, music, art, science,
Football,
football, everything.
all of it. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the guy that's not good at art that's good at math can understand art, and vice versa.
Right.
And I never thought I was good at math until I started understanding these principles, and now it's just like, I got it.
Is are there other artists who are practicing the same thing that you're
Yeah,
into?
there's lots of people.
Okay.
um, Funny enough, there's a lot of people that uh, do psychedelics that get into this,
Yeah.
because evidently, when you're on psychedelics, you enter this world where everything gets super visual. In those proportions are everywhere, and you just start to see everything in a whole different light. And for me, I've known my whole life that I had some extra perception abilities. Um, and the way I can describe them is, I see things, I hear things, and smell things uh, that most people don't. And
Interesting.
I thought everybody was like me. And so when I was a kid, I didn't understand why people didn't notice the things I saw or hear the things I heard. And it wasn't until I was an adult that oh my gosh, they don't see it. It happens to me
I
every
can
day.
I would love for you to expand upon that. I could understand maybe the seeing, because I've seen your art and it's visual, and I could just understand how you would see the world differently. But what do you hear that's different that other people don't hear?
Well,
Actual voices?
yeah, so like it's not like I don't think it is that I hear better. Maybe I do a little bit, but it's more like I'm more present. So I pick out everything and I make a conscious note of it. And when I was a kid, I grew up like in South Carolina in these forests and estuaries and open spaces. And I used to go in the woods a lot, and there was a lot of creatures out there, everything from deer to bear to, foxes and skunks and alligators and, you know, countless types of birds, snakes, you name it. But I could have told you what every sound in that forest was,
Mm.
whether it was a snake, whether it was a friendly snake or not, whether it was a gator, whether it was a hawk, whether it was a deer. And I could feel when the wind changed. I could smell things and knew what they were. You know, it was just wild. And I could,
Huh.
one of the big things that I have is like, and this is like a perception of I feel something, then I see it. So I'll be driving, 80 miles an hour down a dirt road, and I'll turn my head and see a snake in the grass, lock eyes with it for a microsecond.
Huh.
And I felt it first, and then I looked. And it
Huh.
made me think that, you think of something like a rabbit and a hawk. Now, a
Yeah.
rabbit has like big ears so that it can hear the hawk. And the hawk developed really good eyes so it could find the hare. Now, you wonder, in order to develop those things, you know, did the rabbit feel the hawk first and decided to grow bigger ears? And did the hawk feel the rabbit down there in the thick of the brush and decide to sharpen its eyes? I mean, it's kind of like that. Did that develop over time out of need? Like the hawk needed better eyes so it could find so it developed into this. And it's kind of like that. Like I feel things first. But
What do you attribute it to, your sensitivity to those things in your childhood?
just being present in the woods, you have to be ultra present or you're going to get eaten. A gator or a bear or something. I was scared.
Plenty of other kids had that same experience growing up but didn't develop those.
Um,
Was anything in your upbringing or your parents or your household?
um, they kind of left me alone. They kind of like, I was the last of five kids, so they weren't worried about me. But it's kind of like the eerie feeling. I remember I was surfing at Leftovers in Hawaii one time. I was having a great day. The waves were good. So left, peeling down that reef, and um, I just caught a great wave, and I kicked out at the end of it, and all of a sudden, I just got shivers up my spine, and I knew I needed to get up on the reef, which I did. I got up on the reef, and I got up there, and I didn't even know why. And I looked, stand on the reef, and I'm like, what the hell did I do this for? And then I walked back up the reef and plopped back out in the deep end and told my friend, I was like, God, the weirdest thing just happened to me. I didn't think about it till later that night. I told somebody else, and they said, yeah, well, that's where, right in that little deep spot at the end of the wave, is where this boogie boarder got bit by a tiger shark, got killed a couple years before.
Oh,
And I was just like, that's what it was. There must have been a tiger shark right there. And so
or
those,
the energy from what had happened previously, even.
yeah, I think it was probably the shark. I think the shark was probably in that area and was probably, you know, looking for something to bite. And I felt it. And I think everybody has these abilities. They don't listen to them.
Yeah.
They're just so non-present that they don't listen to them.
Yeah.
I can tell you also, like I can be walking down a street, and sometimes like homeless people will be hiding somewhere. I can feel them before I see them.
Yeah.
And it's a real terrible feeling. It's like a hopelessness. And it's an icky feeling, like, ooh. Or I'll be in a crowd of people. And one of the reasons I don't like crowds is it's over sensory for me. Like I can't go to a big football game. I don't really like concerts and things like that.
Yeah.
It's just too much to process. And I'll enter a room and I'll feel somebody icky. And then I try to find them. Like I'm just sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's somebody in here. It's just making my skin crawl.
Yeah.
And I can't relax until I know who it is, so I can avoid them.
Yeah. That's interesting. Um, do you, I'm like, I love your advice about being present. How to avoid or how to stay connected to some of these things is presence. Do you have any methods for staying present? Do you meditate at all or anything like that?
Um, Not really. I mean, spending time outdoors is my biggest um, meditation, and it really allows me to be present. Um, this experience with COVID and being trapped in the hospital um, is made me realize it's breath.
Okay.
That's why COVID is so insidious. It's just you can't breathe. And so I'm realizing that there's something about breathing that can let you slow everything down and force you to be present.
Mm,
Um, you take it for granted that you breathe. You
yeah.
take it for granted that you swallow. I had to relearn how to do those things. And it's crazy that, I thought I knew how to breathe, but I didn't. I wasn't breathing properly. And I wasn't doing it with a proper intention. And now, I do. And so I think, there's probably all kinds of different breath exercises that can help you control yourself, to be present, to be less fearful, to make yourself feel more powerful. And it's through breath.
Okay. That aligns with lots of that ancient wisdom from religion, yoga. Everybody talks about the power of breath.
Yeah. And you definitely notice it when you lose it.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Um, what about, I'm curious what kind of water you drink now after having those insights. Like,
Yeah.
do you buy special water? Do you treat it a certain way?
Um, I tried to. I tried to build some things that would infuse my water, but it's really difficult. Like you know, there are some pretty expensive machines out there that do it. There's something to do with the vorticity too that allows it to all blend together. That's
Okay.
why the eddies and rivers and things are so good. Um, yeah, I mean, all our water's messed up. I mean, we got to totally revamp how we treat water, um, because the other downfall is since it does lock in its lattice structure, it seems like it keeps all the contaminants too. So
Okay.
like when you recycle water, you're not really recycling the information out of it, and so it has to go through that natural process of evaporation and back into the clouds and down again. So I don't drink anything special. I've tried to, you know, do some things on my own and source some machines. All the machines are really expensive, and I'm not sure if they work or not. But
Well,
the
what was that company doing exactly to their water?
they had a system where they filtered it mainly for big agriculture. It wasn't really for people to drink,
Okay.
and and they would take those minerals uh, introduce it to the water, and
So they're adding minerals as opposed to energy, let's say.
well, from my understanding, the minerals don't even have to touch it; it just can go by it into its electromagnetic field. So you know, the results seem very promising. That they were having great results with it. Um, I they didn't let me really look at how the machine worked. Um, it was more the outcome of what they were trying to uh, articulate to people of how it worked was my task, because it sounds
Okay.
so crazy. So I created this painting of all the geometries of water and how it came down from the clouds, and um, that sort of thing,
Okay.
and creating these clusters of molecules which really represent the mineral in water. So then that plant would recognize that and be able to use it. But yeah, I like spring water. There's a place in Sedona that I get water from when I'm there. I think Carlsbad has a spring. Uh, Spring water is good, you know. So
Okay. Good. Um, if you have the time, this is kind of not related to a lot of what we talked about, but I'm just curious. My first introduction to you was through Lost Surfboards,
yep,
probably in the mid 90s. I'm just curious to hear that story of how you connected with them and how that relationship developed and all that.
yeah. Well, I was a production surfboard painter in South Carolina. Painted
Who
my
were
own
you working
boards,
for
and
there?
then, huh?
Who were you working for in South Carolina at the time?
Kelly Richards.
Oh, no way. Cam Richards' dad.
Yep. And
Insane. Did he have, was it Village Surf Shop back then?
yeah, Perfection surfboards.
Amazing, dude.
So I was, you know, I wanted to be a pro surfer like everybody else, and I was like graduated in 1989, and that's right when the surf industry took a dive. So there was, I think, all the tours were stopped, and there was a bunch of companies went out of business, and so Plan B was just do art. And so I was painting surfboards production, and I was kind of,
Was it airbrush back then?
yeah, mainly airbrush. I
Okay.
had the paint pens. I was painting some boards with paint pens and using them for pin lines. And
Gotcha.
then from there, I got the opportunity to go to Hawaii. So I went to Hawaii first, and painted boards on in Haleiwa at Pro Glass. And I went from nowhere, South Carolina, to painting boards for Al Merrick, Rusty, Mike Diffender, for you name it. I had all the best people. And I was painting boards for Tommy Carroll, Tom Curran, um, some of the best surfers and shapers in the world. And so that was great. I was living there, surfing pipeline, and living the dream really. And a few years later, I had an accident pipeline where I hit the reef really bad, and I couldn't work. And so I had to do something. And once I healed up, it was summertime, and there was no work in Hawaii. So a friend of mine, Rob, said I should come to California and work here. And that sounded like a good idea. He said I could stay in his garage until I found a place. And so I came over, immediately got a job at Stewart. Stewart Surfboards was like the biggest thing going. And I got a job with him doing 10 a day minimum. So it was the first time in my life I was actually making a lot of money, which was great. Um, in Hawaii, you might have three, you might have 10. And then you had to figure out, chase everybody down for money. At
Yeah,
Stewart,
yeah.
when I painted my 10 boards and then did customs after that, and I got a check every week, like clockwork. I mean, I was in heaven.
Wow.
And I had sent some drawings to Rip Curl uh, to try to do some t-shirt designs. And they didn't really like them, but the guy Lawrence, I gave them to, ended up giving them to Matt at Lost. He was starting out in the old uh, Herbie Fletcher building. And Matt was painting boards with the Posca pens like I was. So like all my own boards were Posca painted, and I painted a bunch like at Pipeline and stuff for my friends, but none of the companies would let me do it. And so I was riding my bike to work, and uh, I figured it out. I by, and he was painting some cool boards, and um, I kind of came in there and said I painted boards, and he was like, "Yeah, whatever." And, you know, our personalities hit it off right off the bat. Like he's kind of a funny personality, and kind of rough and tumble, and I'm kind of, from the South, and like I can take a not be discouraged. And so Matt's giving me grief, and I said, you know what, I can paint boards better than you can. And I painted. He was like, no way, man, you're dreaming. And I painted a dragon. He's like, ah, oh, well, it's all right. And it was just a cool day because, we became friends that day, and neither one of us had a lot. Neither one of us owned cars. I kind of felt like we were the two guys that nobody wanted, you know. And it just so happened that he was going to Japan. He would make most of his money going to Japan, and so he was going to go over there and shape and do some boards. And his girlfriend Lindsay painted boards too. She was pretty good. She did all these like cool mushrooms and things. But between the two of them, they took them too long. They weren't making any money because it took them so long to paint something. What I brought to it was volume. I could paint really fast. So when he left, he had made a bunch of boards, and he just hired a sales manager, this guy Rick Hazard. And so he left Rick and I in charge of all these boards. And he said, okay, I will let you paint these boards because we need to get them painted while I'm gone. And it was a lot of boards. And I said, great, I'll stop by here after Stuart. And so what would happen is I would get there late in the afternoon, usually around 5. Rick would be leaving, and then I would stay there all night because I didn't have any friends, and paint boards and listen to music. And it was just fun. So I was painting all this crazy stuff on there. And, Rick had his contacts on the East Coast and was like selling them, and the guy was boxing them up and shipping them. And it was great, I'm painting like crazy stuff on them. And Matt calls like 2 weeks into it, like on the phone from Japan, because back then, there's no cell phone, so it's not like he was calling every day. And he's like, "How's it going?" And Rick's like, "It's great. I'm selling these boards, I'm shipping them out, and Drew's painting like these gnarly chicks and all this stuff." And Matt's like, "What?" And Matt kind of yelled at me like, "What are you doing? You're gonna ruin my business. You're painting all this crazy stuff." And Rick's like, "No, they love it." And so when he got back, it was on. Next thing you know, him and I were traveling around the world. We traveled for a good 5 or 6 years together, painting boards and surfing. And the clothing company started. I was designing all that stuff, and we did that for a long time. But at some
What
point,
year did you meet? I'm sorry.
96.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And I just brought volume into it. I could come in and do 10, 15 boards a day.
Yeah.
Not blank, and every one of them would be different.
Do you still work together?
Yeah. So Matt and I, we do like special projects. I'll paint some boards for some of the pros, Mason Ho or Ian Crane or Griffin or somebody. And I'll do some custom things. During COVID, I did a lot of boards out of necessity, really.
Yeah.
Things were looking pretty lean, but we do just things here and there.
Um, as it relates to your recovery, are you painting again, or where are you at in that process?
Not yet. My hand's still a little numb. These two fingers, you see it, they don't move right. I can't. I probably could paint, but I haven't started yet. I have a couple more surgeries because of the kidney stones,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's giving me a lot of pain and problems. So if you see me whinging, that's because I'm got pain in my side. Um,
Okay.
the I'm supposed to have that on Wednesday, so I'm hoping
Oh,
after
wow.
that I'll feel a lot better and I'll be able to sit for a long period of time and paint. But I have some clients that have been waiting a long time, which I'm really happy about because they could have canceled those orders and they allowed me to um, heal, and so that's really nice of them. I have like four
Do you
different.
feel do you feel pressure to expedite your recovery?
Yeah, because I want to get back to work. I want to, I got things to do. Um, I'm so weak though. Like I'm like ridiculously weak. I'm still only 140 pounds, which is nothing for me. And
Yeah.
I got some back problems. My body was taken to zero, so it's wanting to crunch me and pull me forward, and I've got to constantly try to arch my back backwards because my muscles are pulling me forward. Um, so I got a lot of work to do on all my muscles, and it's very humbling. I've never been weak in my life, excuse me, and all of a sudden now I'm like weak. It makes me feel bad for anybody that lives life weak.
Yeah.
Um,
Or who has um like chronic injury,
yeah.
back pain or whatever it is. It's got to be a nightmare. So what does your day consist of currently?
Um, I do everything by myself, so I'd make my breakfast, and I usually have physical therapy every other day, and that's a lot of walking, a lot of up and down, lifting weights over my head, things like that. Um, things like that. Uh, Signing a lot of things, and I try to take a nap. I get really tired.
Yeah.
So, I just in the last week, I've been doing a lot of time off oxygen. I was on oxygen before that. So now I've done up to 6 hours off oxygen. So I'm
Okay.
really trying to do that. And I feel like I'll probably be totally off oxygen within a few weeks.
Okay.
And that's a huge milestone because, in February, they were telling me that I was never going to get off oxygen, that I was never going to get off the ventilator, that I would have to be institutionalized. And that was scary. I was like,
Yeah.
you're out of your mind. I'm not, no way I'm staying on this ventilator. And so the ventilator breathes for you. And I was on the ventilator for 70 days. And they said that, being on it that long, normally people can't get off of it because your lungs
Right.
and diaphragm are so atrophied that they can't do it for themselves anymore. So I had to fight that thing, and I had to breathe without it for 3 days straight, 72 hours to get off of it. And so that was another miracle thing that they said that they hadn't seen anybody do, go 70 days and then 72 hours off to get to remove it.
Right.
And, I had some really good people, um, respiratory people that, egged me on. And it was hard, man. It was like, I was afraid to go to sleep at night. because I thought I might die in my sleep. And I
Wow.
had nurses hold my hand all night and watch over me. And I can't thank them enough. I can't thank all these people enough. Not all of them were like that, but I had certain ones that just they were rooting for me. And even the last hospital I was in, as I'm being discharged, and this is the place I learned to walk again. The lady in charge, who was a doctor, was having me fill out the papers, and she was getting all like weepy eyed and crying. And she says, "I wanted you to know that I voted against you being sent here because I didn't think that you were going to make it and be a candidate that could walk again."
Wow.
And she just said that, she'd never seen anybody go through this program and do it like I did it, coming from where I came from.
Right.
And she said, "I'm just thankful I was outvoted." And so that was another like miracle thing. Uh, and learning to walk again was the hardest thing I ever had to do. Um, it's just crazy when your body doesn't work,
Right.
and especially being a guy like me that's used to doing everything, and I've been strong my whole life. Um, I never even thought about it; just took it for granted that I can lift a giant trash can over my head, over the cars, and go and do everything. There's nothing I couldn't do. And now I took my wife out to a restaurant for her birthday, and I couldn't open the door of the restaurant because I was so weak. I was like, "Ah!" And she
Wow.
had to open it, and I'm just like, "Oh man." So it's gone full circle.
Well, I'll tell you what your story has done for me, or kind of reminded me of, is like I, I've never been weak either, and I've never actually dealt with sickness either. And from my perspective, I'm not very sympathetic to people who are going through things. And your story is a good reminder that I need to be more sympathetic. When people ask for help or ask for send prayers or thoughts or whatever, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that. But I don't really put that much thought and energy into it. And then when you see the effects of it, and I've had a couple instances in my life, I had grandparents who had cancer and passed away from it. And so those are kind of reminders of what it's like for somebody to go through suffering. But yours is a lot more relatable because you're young, because you're strong, and because you did everything right, essentially, to mitigate against this. So to hear the process of dealing with it really resonates, and makes me want to be more like those nurses who are there for you.
Yeah, and we had a lot of people like do things like cook dinner for us and fix things at the house. This one guy, he built a ramp at my house, and I'd painted a surfboard for his son. And he's like, "Well, I'm going to build a ramp because it meant so much to me that, you were nice to my son." Um, so, I mean, it's almost like you got to live your life like a life well lived in a way that it's all going to come back to you. And that's what really felt good to me is I had gotten enough positive points by living my
Yeah.
life in such a way that people wanted to pray for me. I think that's an important lesson for people. Like, you can't be a jerk your whole life and expect everybody to pray for you when you need it. So
Yeah.
you gotta live it. You gotta, you know, like I'll be painting somewhere and inevitably there's somebody that has 8 million questions for you and is soaking up all the energy. And, I always take the time to sit with that person and give them all the information that I can. And it's just my nature. But, you know, I got to think all the times that I've done that or the times I've painted one more surfboard for somebody. Like I'll go down to Mexico and I'll paint surfboards in Puerto, and this goes back all the way when I was in my 20s, and I just wanted to make their boards look better because they always had like broken boards and crappy looking boards, and so I'd pick one day and paint boards for free. And it got known that when I would go down there, that I'd paint boards on one day, so everybody would be waiting, and it came time where I was painting boards for the kids I painted for years earlier.
Wow.
And that goodwill um, comes back.
Yeah.
And it comes back in lots of ways. One great way was in the lineup. I'd be paddling for a wave, and somebody would be like hassling me, and all the Mexican guys would be like, "Hey, you don't mess with Uncle Drew." And they got me, you know? So, it's important to live in such a way that you have, you know, done for others. And that's where it comes in. And the hard part for me was accepting, because I'd never really accepted from others.
Right.
And that was a lesson Maria and I had to learn. Because we really didn't ask for anything. We had people donate money to us, because I hadn't been working. Um, and, the being in the hospital for 4.5 months is pretty mind boggling financially.
Yeah.
But we never asked for anything other than prayers, and people did all kinds of wonderful things for us. Almost it made me feel guilty of like, wow, like it's too much. But people wanted to do it, and it was really hard for us to accept it, just because I'm not used to that. I'm used to being on the
Yeah.
other side of that.
Yeah.
And some of these people did it anonymously, and
Crazy.
you know, and it's going to help us not have to stress. I mean, if I was losing my business on top of all this, it would be awful.
Totally.
And then if I was going into more debt due to these doctor bills, it would be, terrible. But the universe has a weird way of saving us, and it definitely came through for us. I mean, in all different kinds of ways. Um, and it must mean that I'm meant to be here and do something. And so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and what I've always done, because I think that's it. Um,
Yeah, I can't wait to see what you're going to do. I really feel like you'll come back stronger than ever. I mean, yeah, I would imagine it's going to alter your perspective on every piece of food you put into your body, everything in terms of health and wellness and thoughts that you put into your body, and all of that. The
yeah,
output will be the result, you know?
yeah, and the arts is going to be affected in ways I don't know yet. But I mean, I'm still processing so much of it, and I'm trying to keep a good face on it. Uh,
Yeah,
I mean, I think I have a bit of PTSD due to
of course.
the gnarliness of it. It was I can't stress enough how bad it actually was, as far as on a personal level of suffering. Um, I mean, it was just absolutely awful, and I I don't even know how I survived that part of it. It just it was like being a prisoner of war or something, and being
Yeah.
tortured. And I hope nobody has to go through what I did. It's just cruel. And I survived it somehow. And I try not to think about it. I mean, I can talk about it now and and laugh and joke about it, and talk about it matter of factly. But when I first got home, I couldn't talk about it because it would just make you cry.
Sure.
That's another thing. I'm not a person that cries. And like, good God. I mean, there was moments where, you just be bawling because you're just in agony and you just want it to stop and it wouldn't. And you feel like the whole universe is trying to stamp you out like a dirty cigarette, and you got to keep fighting and
Yeah.
fight for every breath. That's where I learned the real breath lessons is, you know, fighting for that breath. Sometimes I'd stay up all night fighting for my breath for days at a time. And, that takes from some serious concentration and strong will. So, you don't know if you have that unless you've lived it. So, I mean, it goes back to the first question of, that's really it. You
Yeah.
need to live your life and with intention and create a person that's ready for adversity. So when it does hit, that you can sustain your life, and because I definitely attribute that to the reason I survived. Otherwise, you could have just given up and you'd be done.
Right. Well, this has been an inspirational conversation, and I think that you sharing all of this will serve a lot of people.
Good. That's all I want. I didn't really sugarcoat anything. It is what it is. Uh, thanks for giving me a platform to do it. And, I plan on probably maybe, writing or, doing some talks about it,
Yeah.
due to the fact that, it just, the topic itself is bigger than being sick. It has a lot of uh, usefulness of ways to live. And so I like to package it as, a way to live, not necessarily a way to survive. Um, and just so happens that COVID's the thing that I was dealing with, but it could have just as easily been a car accident or something like that. It could have been anything.
Yeah.
I think
I think
COVID's the thing that's happening right now.
you did a good job in our communication about packaging it as a way to live as opposed to a way to survive. Everything I felt, these are like life lessons that we should have been living all along, and unfortunately sometimes we need a really drastic reminder. But they definitely, I think you've done a great job communicating the life lessons part.
Yeah.
So, but you also, it's a delicate thing. Processing is a delicate thing where you want to process before you really start telling the story, because otherwise it just becomes the story that you're telling it's a different version, so like fully process it, fully absorb it, fully kind of try to understand its meaning for you before you start trying to retell it.
Yeah, because it's not over.
Right. I could
And
tell that. Yeah.
like my feet or feel, like when your feet are cold surfing, like in ice cold water and you can't feel them anymore. That's the way
Yeah.
my feet feel all the time. And they say that'll go away, but you learn it. You imagine trying to learn to walk again on ice cubes. It's
Yeah,
crazy. Um,
totally.
but my hope is that, I'm going to get to that magic weight. I'm going to build my muscles back up, and, I'll be breathing deep and I'll look great. And then I'll tell the story. And, you know, who knows what other insights I'll have at that time. But, I'm definitely not done processing it,
Yeah.
because there again, it's too much to process. It's a sad story. It's, um, you know, I have my side of it. Then you have my wife's side of it. I mean, that poor thing had to deal with so much
Yeah.
that it breaks my heart. My son, had to deal with it. My 20-year-old son, who, by the way, was like amazing. I mean, he would spend 8 hours a day with me, moving my legs for me when they couldn't move, so that they would not lock up. He had to grow up real quick.
Sure.
And so there's all those things too. So we all grew as a family. The friends that came to see me when I was in bad shape, I mean, they're forever changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't even talk, you know, and having one of your friends cry on the side of your bed is hard to watch, you know. So, and I really couldn't say anything to him. I tried to write him a message, but that was hard. But so we'll have to do another talk when I get all better.
Well, I was going to say I'll be tracking all of it, of course. I'm anxious to see you surf again. I'm anxious to see the art that comes out of this. And I'll direct people in post-production. Little outro. I'll direct everybody to your website and social media. But is there anywhere else that you want people to know about?
No, that's probably perfect right there.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, thank
Cool.
you. Where do you live?
Just near Huntington Beach,
HB, yeah. Right
so
on.
not far.
Yeah, not too far. We're down in San Clemente, so our gallery's open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you're down
Okay,
here, come say
perfect.
hi.
Will do. Thank you so much, Drew. I appreciate the time.
All right, man. I'll see you later.
Okay, talk to you soon.